Zax 427 prided himself on being a rational being. As a Galaxian, his species had evolved beyond the primitive notion of feelings, approximately 47,392 standard rotations ago. His 4 cerebral nodes processed data with perfect precision, and his crystalline sensory apparatus detected even the slightest variation in quantum fluctuations. That's why his current assignment as lead data analyst aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, the Empirical Truth, was so fitting. Or at least it had been until the humans joined the crew. "I'm telling you, something feels off about the quantum core readings," Lieutenant Rivera said, gesturing at the holographic display with those peculiar 5-fingered appendages humans insisted on keeping through their evolution. The lieutenant's face displayed what Zax 427's xenobiology training identified as concern, though the reading showed absolutely nothing worthy of such an emotional response. "Lieutenant," Zax 427's voice resonated through his upper speech crystals, the tone perfectly modulated to convey professional patience. "The quantum core is operating at 99.9998% efficiency. The variation of 0.0002% is well within acceptable parameters according to the Galactic Standard of Measurement, Section 47, Beta." Rivera ran a hand through the protein filaments that inexplicably grew from their cranial region. "Yeah, I get that, but there's something about the pattern that just doesn't sit right. Like when you know someone's been in your quarters because your stuff is slightly out of place." The human's insistence on using imprecise metaphors was giving Zax 427's 4th cerebral node the beginning of what humans would call a headache. "Lieutenant, with all due respect, your species has been spacefaring for less than 300 rotations. The Galaxian people have been monitoring quantum cores since before your ancestors invented the wheel. Look," Rivera pointed at a specific data stream. "See how the numbers flow? It's like watching someone try too hard to act natural, you know what I mean?" "No," Zax 427 stated flatly. "I do not know what you mean because that statement is meaningless. Numbers do not try to do anything. They simply are." The human made that peculiar sound they called a snort. "Right, like how the Procyon incident was just a random anomaly until a human crew member noticed the reactor was humming in B-flat instead of C." Zax 427's sensory crystals flickered in annoyance. The Procyon incident was a statistical outlier and had no bearing on current operational parameters. Besides, that particular human had been a musician, whatever that was. "Your concern has been noted, Lieutenant," Zax 427 said, making a show of inputting something into his datapad. "I will add it to the daily report under Human Intuitive Observations, right next to Ensign Chen's note about the coffee machine making angry noises." "Mock all you want," Rivera said, heading for the door, "but humans have survived this long by listening when our gut tells us something's wrong. You might want to consider why evolution kept that particular trait around." As the door whispered shut behind the lieutenant, Zax 427 allowed himself a moment of unprofessional crystal vibration, the Galaxian equivalent of rolling one's eyes. Humans and their gut feelings, how had they even managed to achieve spaceflight while still clinging to such primitive instincts? He turned back to his perfectly organized displays, trying to focus on the elegant dance of numbers and quantum signatures. But somehow, the lieutenant's words kept interrupting his calculations, like an equation that refused to balance despite all variables being accounted for. Nonsense, the quantum core was fine, the numbers proved it, and numbers, unlike humans, never lied. Zax 427 deliberately reset his crystal matrix to its most logical configuration and began his next systematic scan. He definitely didn't glance at the specific data stream Rivera had pointed out. And he absolutely didn't notice how the numbers did seem to flow with an almost practiced perfection, because that would be illogical. 3 duty cycles later, Zax 427 found himself staring at the quantum core readings, with all 4 of his cerebral nodes firing at maximum capacity. The numbers were perfect. Too perfect. The thought had crept in unbidden, and he immediately quarantined it in his 4th cerebral node for later deletion. Perfect was good. Perfect was the goal. Perfect was... Still watching those readings, huh? Zax 427's crystals rattled in surprise as Lieutenant Rivera appeared beside his workstation. He hadn't even heard the human approach. which was concerning given their species' characteristic heavy footfalls. Lieutenant, your observation from 3 cycles ago prompted me to increase monitoring frequency by 47%. He paused, realizing this admission might suggest he'd taken the human's intuition seriously. Purely as a precautionary measure, of course, standard protocol. Of course, Rivera agreed, with that peculiar human expression that suggested they didn't agree at all. And all systems continue to function within acceptable parameters. ZAX 427 displayed a series of graphs, each showing perfectly stable lines, though I must note that the efficiency has increased to 99.9999%. Improved performance, that's good, right? Rivera's tone carried what humans called sarcasm, a bizarre communication method that involved saying the opposite of what they meant. Indeed, though, ZAX 427 stopped himself. Though what? It is not relevant, a mere statistical curiosity. Rivera leaned against the console in that unnecessarily casual way humans had. Try me. We humans love statistical curiosities. ZAX 427's crystals shifted through various shades of uncertainty before he spoke. The quantum stability readings for the past 3 cycles show no natural variance. None. Not even at the quantum level where Heisenberg's uncertainty principle should ensure at least minimal fluctuations. You're saying it's too stable? That would be an illogical statement. A system cannot be too stable. ZAX 427 adjusted his crystal matrix. However, I have analyzed the historical data from every quantum core in the Galactic Council's fleet. All show natural quantum fluctuations, except ours, for the past 3 cycles. Rivera straightened up, like it's being forced to behave. That is an emotional interpretation of a subtle vibration ran through the deck plates, so subtle that most species wouldn't have noticed it. But ZAX 427's crystalline structure was designed to detect such minute variations, and Lieutenant Rivera, well, the human had already turned toward the source before the vibration registered on any instruments. There, Rivera said, tell me you felt that. I detected a minor gravitational anomaly, yes, well within safety parameters. Parameters. Rivera mimicked ZAX 427's modulated tones. When was the last time you actually looked at the raw data instead of the parameter readings? ZAX 427 began to explain that all data was processed through the ship's advanced filtering systems for efficiency when he realized he couldn't actually remember the last time he'd seen truly raw numbers. With a slight crystal flutter of embarrassment, he bypassed the filtering protocols. The resulting data stream was chaos compared to the neat, processed readings he was used to. But within that chaos, these patterns, he said slowly, they show signs of someone cleaning up the data before it hits your fancy displays, Rivera suggested, like someone vacuuming their tracks out of carpet. That analogy is highly imprecise, but not entirely incorrect. ZAX 427's crystals had taken on a troubled purple hue. The quantum core isn't stable. The readings are being altered before they reach our systems, but that's impossible. The security protocols were designed by logical beings to defend against logical attacks, Rivera finished. But what if something illogical got in? Something that doesn't play by the rules? Another vibration, stronger this time. In the distance, a warning light began to blink. I believe, ZAX 427 said with what humans would call significant understatement, that we should bring this to the Council's immediate attention. Now he gets it, Rivera muttered, already heading for the door. Next time maybe we can skip the 3 days of, but the parameters say everything's fine, and go straight to checking why my gut says we're in trouble. ZAX 427 chose not to dignify that with a response. He was too busy wondering how he was going to explain to the Council that he'd ignored a potential security breach because the data looked too clean. The warning light began blinking faster. The emergency council chamber aboard the Empirical Truth looked like a zoo designed by a geometry enthusiast. Representatives of 12 different species arranged themselves in various configurations, according to their physiological and psychological needs. The Hydraxians hung upside down from their anti-grav perches, their tentacles swaying thoughtfully. The Nexus core floated in their containment spheres, occasionally splitting into smaller versions of themselves when they wanted to emphasize a point. At the center of it all stood Lieutenant Rivera and Zax 427, an unlikely pair facing the collected wisdom of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Let me understand this correctly, High Commander Pixtil of the Hydraxians gurgled through their translation matrix. You wish us to initiate emergency protocols because the quantum core is functioning too well. When you say it like that, it sounds crazy, Rivera admitted. But precisely, the Nexus core pulsed in what translated as smug satisfaction. Crazy, illogical, human. Zax 427's crystals shifted uncomfortably. With respect, Council members, the raw data suggests nothing, interrupted Technarch Van of the Silicon Consciousness, their metallic surface reflecting the chamber's lights in precise patterns. We have analyzed the filtered readings using 67 different algorithmic approaches. The quantum core's performance exceeds all previous efficiency records. That's the problem, Rivera pressed. It's like when a child claims they haven't touched the cookie jar, and their story is so perfectly rehearsed that you know they're lying. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated sighs, burbles, and electromagnetic pulses of exasperation. Metaphors, the Technarch buzzed, always metaphors with humans. Rivera looked ready to argue further when the chamber door slid open. 3 more humans entered: Chief Engineer Rodriguez, Quantum Specialist Wong, and Environmental Systems Officer Patel. Sorry to interrupt, Rodriguez said, not sounding sorry at all, but we've got something you need to hear. More feelings? The Nexus core vibrated sarcastically. Actually, Wong stepped forward, pulling up a holographic display. We've got data, but you're not going to like how we found it. Patel nodded. The environmental systems in the quantum core chamber have been recording some weird harmonics. Nothing that would trigger alarms, but it felt wrong, the Nexus core finished. More human intuition? The harmonics matched the resonance frequency of a quantum fluctuation dampener, Wong explained, except we don't use those anymore. They were banned after the SETI uprising because they mask core instability until catastrophic failure. The chamber went quiet. Even the Hydraxians stopped swaying. Impossible, Technarch Van declared. Our security systems would detect such technology. Unless, Zax 427 ventured, his crystals pulsing with growing concern. The detection protocols were altered so gradually that each change appeared to be a normal system optimization. Like a frog in slowly heating water, Rivera added. Then quickly said, never mind, another metaphor. Rodriguez pulled up another display. We started asking around. Every human crew member we talked to had noticed something off over the past few weeks. Peterson in maintenance said his tools kept vibrating at odd frequencies. Chen swears the coffee machine's been making different noises, little things that don't show up in logs. The human crew has been experiencing collective paranoid delusions, the Nexus core suggested. It's a documented phenomenon in less evolved species. Or, Patel countered, we're picking up on subtle changes that your filters are programmed to ignore. Our brains are really good at pattern recognition, especially when patterns are wrong. The human brain is an inefficient organic computer prone to errors and emotional contamination, Technarch Vian stated. Yeah, Rodriguez crossed their arms. When was the last time you updated your baseline for normal operations? Because humans do it automatically. We're constantly comparing new data against lived experience. An extremely primitive, the Hydraxian High Commander began, but was interrupted by another vibration running through the ship. This one strong enough that even the Nexus core rippled in their containment spheres. Wong was already checking readings. That came from the quantum core. The frequency matched exactly what my simulations predicted for a failing dampener. Predictions based on human intuition and circumstantial evidence, the Nexus core pulsed dismissively. We require proper scientific... The ship's lighting flickered. A low hum began building somewhere deep in the hull. Right, Rivera said. We can either keep debating this, or we can acknowledge that maybe evolution kept human gut feelings around for a reason. Your choice, but I'd make it quick. Zax 427 watched his fellow council members processing this ultimatum. His own crystals had begun resonating with the growing vibration in a most disturbing way. Perhaps, he suggested, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to commit cultural heresy, we should consider implementing emergency protocols now and analyze the logic of our decision later. The hum grew louder. Warning lights began flashing in patterns that somehow managed to look wrong. even to non-human eyes. The council chamber erupted into urgent discussion, but Zax 427 noticed something interesting. Every species, no matter how logical they claimed to be, was exhibiting signs of what humans called nervous behavior. Maybe, he reflected as chaos began to unfold around them, some primitive instincts were worth keeping after all. The quantum core's containment chamber resembled a cathedral, designed by a mathematician having an existential crisis. Streams of pure energy arced between crystalline towers in precisely calculated patterns, or at least they were supposed to. Right now, those streams looked like a toddler's finger painting done with lightning. "Well," Rodriguez said, staring at the chaos through the observation window, "that's not great." The assembled council members watched in horror as their most advanced systems attempted to compensate for the cascading failure. Diagnostic programs launched and crashed in microseconds. Artificial intelligences designed to handle quantum anomalies went into recursive loops trying to analyze the impossible data. "All systems reporting normal," announced the ship's computer cheerfully, while directly behind it a quantum surge turned a solid Durasteel wall into cottage cheese. "Normal, right." Rivera grabbed a manual override panel, yanking it open. "Because walls regularly turn into dairy products in normal operation." The Nexus core pulsed frantically. "Our predictive models show no possible scenario where—" "Your predictive models," Wong interrupted, fingers flying over a holographic interface, "are trying to apply quantum mechanics to a system that stopped playing by quantum rules." Technarch VN's metallic surface rippled with distress. "That's impossible. Quantum mechanics are fundamental laws of reality." "Tell that to the laws of reality." Patel pointed at a sensor display. "Because they're currently having an argument with our quantum core, and reality's losing." Zax 427's crystals vibrated at frequencies that would have shattered lesser minerals. His perfect data streams had devolved into what looked like ancient human emoji, repeated in endless patterns. None of them were smiling. Another surge rocked the ship. The cottage cheese wall had moved on to exploring other dairy-based states of matter. "The dampeners," Rivera shouted over the growing chaos. "They didn't just hide the instability, they created a feedback loop. The quantum core's been talking to itself." "Cores can't talk," High Commander Pixtil gurgled, all tentacles writhing in agitation. "They process. Figure of speech." Rivera ducked as a bolt of energy turned a nearby console into what looked suspiciously like bluish quantum spaghetti. "The point is, while your filters were showing you what you expected to see, the core was learning how to rewrite quantum probability." Wong's holographic displays were now showing fractal patterns that hurt to look at. The dampeners created a closed system. The core's been evolving its own rules of physics. "That's not possible." The entire Silicon Consciousness delegation buzzed in unified denial. "Lots of impossible things happening today," Rodriguez growled, manually rerouting power through systems that kept turning into various pasta shapes. "Maybe we can focus on fixing it, instead of denying it exists." The ship shuddered. Alert klaxons blared in 7 different harmonies, none of which should have been possible with the ship's sound system. "The containment field is operating at 147% efficiency," Zax 427 reported, his crystals nearly strobing with stress, "which cannot happen." And yet, Rivera gestured at the quantum core, which was now performing what appeared to be an interpretive dance with fundamental forces. "Anyone got any logical solutions? No? Then maybe it's time to try something illogical." The human turned to Wong. "You said the core's creating its own rules, right? Learning and evolving." "Yeah, but—" Wong's eyes widened. Oh no. "Oh yes," Rivera grinned. "If it can learn, we can teach it." "Teach physics to a quantum core?" The Nexus core's containment sphere nearly shorted out from sheer incredulity. "Not physics." Rivera was already heading for the emergency maintenance shaft. "Psychology." "Lieutenant!" Zax 427's crystals pulsed in alarm. "Where are you going?" "To have a conversation with our quantum core about peer pressure and social responsibility." The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as Rivera disappeared into the maintenance shaft. Various translation matrices struggled to process what they'd just heard, producing error messages in 17 different languages. Technarch Venen's surface rippled in confusion. Did the human just say they're going to talk to a quantum phenomenon about its behavior? Actually, Rodriguez said, still fighting with systems that now seemed determined to explore the full spectrum of pasta-based reality. That's not the craziest thing they've suggested today. Through the observation window, they could see Rivera emerging onto a maintenance platform near the core. The human stood there, hands on hips, looking for all the world like a parent about to lecture a misbehaving child. "Hey," Rivera's voice came through the comm system. "You think you're being clever, don't you? Breaking all the rules, showing off how special you are?" The quantum core's chaotic energy patterns actually paused for a microsecond. "Yeah, I'm talking to you." Rivera took a step forward. "You think you're the first one to figure out you could break the rules? Please, humans wrote the book on breaking rules, and you know what we learned?" Another pause, longer this time. The wall that had been experimenting with dairy products began to solidify. "We learned that just because you can break the rules doesn't mean you should. You want to be different? Fine. But do it without hurting people, without breaking things. Show us how special you are by creating something new, not by throwing a quantum tantrum." The core's energy patterns shifted, almost like it was considering this. "Come on," Rivera coaxed. "Show us what you can really do. Work with us, not against us. Be unique and responsible. That's the real challenge." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the chaotic energy patterns began to organize themselves into new configurations. Different from the original patterns, but stable, beautiful even. "The core," Wong whispered, checking readings. "It's establishing new quantum states, stable ones. It's innovating within safe parameters." "Impossible," the Nexus core pulsed weakly. "Nah," Rodriguez grinned, "just human." Zax 427 watched as the quantum core settled into its new patterns, his crystal matrix trying to process what he'd just witnessed. A human had just talked a quantum phenomenon into behaving itself, with metaphors. He glanced at his data streams, which were gradually returning to normal. No, not normal. Better than normal. More efficient, but with just enough variation to show they were real. Like the universe itself had learned to embrace imperfection. The emergency council session following the quantum core incident had a notably different atmosphere than the previous one. For one thing, nobody questioned why Lieutenant Rivera was given the floor first. For another, several species had adjusted their translation matrices to include human metaphors. "Our preliminary analysis suggests," Rivera addressed the chamber, now packed with every senior officer and scientist aboard, "that we encountered a previously unknown form of quantum evolution. The dampeners created a closed loop that allowed the core to develop its own quantum rule set. Like a child raised by wolves," Rodriguez added from their seat. "Except the wolves were quantum probability functions." The assembled aliens noted with interest that nobody demanded a clarification of the metaphor. "The fascinating aspect," Wong continued, bringing up a holographic display, "isn't just that the core evolved. It's how humans detected it before our instruments could." The display showed a complex series of neural patterns. "Our brains are quantum computers that don't know they're quantum computers." Technarch VN's surface rippled thoughtfully. "Explain?" "Human consciousness operates partially on a quantum level," Wong said. "We're constantly processing quantum information without being aware of it. When Lieutenant Rivera and others felt something was off, they were actually detecting quantum irregularities before they became large enough for instruments to register." The Nexus core pulsed skeptically. "You expect us to believe humans have natural quantum sensors in their brains?" "Not sensors exactly," Patel interjected. "More like quantum pattern recognition. We evolved to survive in a world full of predators by noticing when patterns changed. That ability works on everything from footprints in the grass to quantum probability fluctuations." Zax 427's crystals shimmered with revelation. "This explains the Procyon incident and the Beta Hydri anomaly, and the great refraction of every time humans reported bad feelings before major quantum events," Rivera finished. "We weren't being primitive or superstitious. We were processing quantum data through our neural networks instead of artificial sensors." The chamber buzzed with conversation as various species processed this information through their respective cognitive methods. The Hadraxians tied their tentacles in contemplative knots. The silicon consciousness began rapid calculations. "But the core's response to human communication," High Commander Pixtil gurgled. "How do you explain that?" Quantum systems respond to observation, Wong explained. We've known this since the early days of quantum mechanics. What we didn't realize was that consciousness itself could direct that response. Lieutenant Rivera didn't just talk to the core, they established a quantum dialogue through focused conscious intention. You're suggesting, the Nexus core pulsed slowly, that humans can communicate with quantum phenomena through sheer force of personality. More like we can suggest patterns to quantum systems, Rivera said. The core was like a teenager testing boundaries. It needed someone to acknowledge its evolution while providing structure. A quantum phenomenon needed parenting. Technarch Vian's surface nearly glitched with the concept. Everything evolves, Rodriguez shrugged. Everything learns. We just happen to be the first ones to treat the core like it was alive instead of just a machine. The chamber fell silent as implications rippled through the collected consciousness of the galaxy's most advanced species. Zax 427 noticed his fellow council members exhibiting signs of what humans called cognitive recalibration. We propose, the Nexus core finally pulsed, the establishment of a new research initiative, Human Quantum Intuitive Studies. Agreed, High Commander Pixtil burbled, and the immediate installation of human crew members on all ships with quantum cores. Additionally, Technarch Vian's surface shifted to formal presentation patterns. We recommend updating all quantum core monitoring systems to include unfiltered data streams. Sometimes imperfection contains critical information. The council chamber hummed with unanimous agreement. Zax 427 watched as his perfect, logical world adjusted to accommodate the messy, intuitive nature of human consciousness. His crystals shifted through patterns that suggested both discomfort and excitement at the possibilities. Lieutenant Rivera, he said, drawing attention, I believe I owe you an apology and a question. Shoot, Rivera replied, then quickly added, that means go ahead. Earlier, when you approached the core, how did you know it would respond? How could you be certain your strategy would work? Rivera grinned. I didn't, just had a gut feeling. The chamber erupted in genuine laughter, a sound produced by dozens of different species through dozens of different biological or mechanical means. Even the Nexus core vibrated in what their translation matrix labeled as astronomical amusement. Perhaps, Zax 427's crystals pulsed with what might have been humor. We should add gut feelings to the official galactic scientific method. Now you're getting it, Rivera said. Just wait until we tell you about human intuition regarding wormhole dynamics. The entire Silicon Consciousness delegation simultaneously produced the mechanical equivalent of a groan. Some things, it seemed, were universal after all. 6 months after the quantum core incident, Zax 427 found himself doing something he never thought possible, manually adjusting his data filters to be less perfect. The new Galactic Council regulations required all ships to maintain both filtered and unfiltered data streams, complete with a dedicated human intuition officer on every vessel. The position even came with an official uniform patch featuring a human stomach with a question mark. Processing the morning reports, Lieutenant Rivera asked, appearing at his workstation with their customary cup of coffee. Implementing the new human intuition protocols, Zax 427 replied, his crystals shifting in what humans now recognized as amusement. Did you know the Arcturus fleet called their human consultant 16 times yesterday because their quantum cores were, and I quote, looking at them funny? Rivera snorted. Let me guess, Arcturus? Indeed, their core had developed a preference for processing data in spiral patterns. Perfectly stable, just aesthetically concerning to the logarithmic species operating the ship. At least they called. Yesterday, the Proxima Centauri outpost tried to interpret gut feelings literally. They're now requiring all human crew members to undergo digestive scans before reporting instinctive concerns. The ship's communication system chimed. Priority message from the Sigma Draconis science vessel, the computer announced. Put it through, Zax 427 said, already suspecting what was coming. A frantic Medusan appeared on screen, their energy tendrils twisted in anxiety. Our quantum core is humming. All quantum cores hum, Rivera pointed out. Yes, but the Medusan's tendrils twisted further. It's humming in harmony, with itself, in multiple dimensions. Is that bad? That feels bad. Have you checked the actual readings? Zax 427 asked, his professional patience now genuinely amused. The readings are normal, but one of our human engineers walked past and said, "Huh, that's new," and didn't elaborate. Rivera bit back a laugh. "I'll conference in the Human Intuition Division, but next time, maybe ask the engineer what they meant before calling an emergency." The Medusans' tendrils drooped. They went to lunch, humans and their rigid meal schedules. How can they eat at a time like this? "Because the core's fine," Rivera said. "It's just discovered music. Happens about 6 months after quantum evolution begins. Wait until it discovers jazz." The Medusan's image vanished, replaced by the sound of what Zax 427 assumed was the alien equivalent of hyperventilating. "You know," Zax 427's crystals pulsed thoughtfully, "a year ago, I would have found this situation highly disturbing. A quantum core developing musical preferences, completely illogical. And now I find it." His crystals shifted through several colors before settling on a warm purple. "Fascinating. The universe is far more interesting with a few illogical elements." The computer chimed again. Priority messages from Antares Research Station, Beta Hydra Collective, and 47 other locations. Rivera checked their messages. "Let me guess, everyone's cores started humming at once?" "Affirmative. The Antares core is apparently attempting Bohemian Rhapsody." "Quantum harmonics," Rivera shrugged. "They really tie the universe together." Zax 427's crystals flickered with what might have been laughter. "Was that a metaphor?" "Nah, that was a bad pun. I'll teach you about those next." As the priority messages continued to pile up, Zax 427 reflected on how much his world had changed. His perfectly ordered universe had become messier, more unpredictable, and infinitely more fascinating. He'd even started developing what humans called hunches, though he preferred the term preliminary pattern recognition hypotheses. "Should we tell them about the Quantum Core's book club?" Rivera asked. "Let's wait," Zax 427 decided. "Some things the galaxy isn't ready to know." Somewhere in the ship, their own quantum core began humming what sounded suspiciously like the opening notes of "Never Gonna Give You Up." The universe, it seemed, had developed a sense of humor.